So what we have today is just a short little demonstration, mainly to kind of get you more familiar with what we're expecting when we do all the Christmas decorating here. And of course we decorate the entire property. We decorate everything from the soda house. We go to the library here, to the house, to the main residence, the barns, all the poles along the way. We have roping and swags. Wreaths, we use a wide variety of different things. We go down to the visitor center, into the store. And all along the roadway. So we have all the different buildings. So as you know, as many of you have been here in the past, it's quite a feat that we try to put out in 2 days, don't we? So fortunately, we have wonderful volunteers like you that take care of about 85% of it. And then Keith and I and some of the service team, we install the material the week after that you're here, because you'll be here Wednesday and Thursday. And on Friday, we'll be completing some of the material. And the following week, it becomes installed. So after it's installed, we want it to look really beautiful. People come in the day after Thanksgiving and they come into Christmas. So the neat type of decorations that we're going to have for you this year are, as everyone knows, we have a lot of fruit that we like to do. So different spots will require, different wreaths will require different types of decorations for the property. Around the store, we like to put things that are more natural. We like to use a lot of fruits and sometimes even put vegetables on them, that sort of thing, of whatever is going to be pertaining to that particular area. The the decorations that are on the large visitor center are usually very conservative out there at the top. But we have some really fun things. We have like little lotus pods to use. Did you love the lotus pods? We have a lot of cones, because that's a nice, the family decorated with more natural products. But, as this is 2017, so they want to kind of pump it up a little bit more. So we have some really nice picks like this for you to add. We have more arriving any day now. We have a lot of picks like this. We'll have them that are pre-made just like this, and then we'll have some that are just plain berries. So we have a lot of those too. And now these are kind of my favorite to use. I do have a couple of bowls of cotton. Aren't they fun? Bowls of cotton. The family did grow cotton here, so we try to have something that the family probably used at one time. So these were really a lot of fun. So we do have some cotton and just plain berries too, like a winter berry. Dried flowers like gold yarrow. The dried flowers work really good. The family probably did use a lot of dried flowers. They probably didn't have eucalyptus, but we like eucalyptus, and it's one of my favorites. So sometimes I just incorporate it because it's one of my favorites. And to give it some nice bright white color, because sometimes they have a tendency to get a little lost on the door with all green, we add a little bit of status, and we just break it off in little pieces, and we tuck it in. Very similar. What did I do with mine? Oh, here we go. This is one that's going to be at the schoolhouse, okay, that I made yesterday. Because I thought the school children probably really made some more natural materials. Last year we had cotton, I think, on it. I wouldn't mind probably putting a little bit. I don't have my bird in here yet. I have my little bird, but I usually put a little cardinal in here. And this again is all like natural materials except for these few picks. So this is going to be more of a permanent type of wreath. This is really ideal on a door that's going to get really hot, and that school door gets really, really warm. So we've found over a period of years that these wreaths sometimes will yellow out and brown out on us really fast. So we're trying to concentrate on those particular doors that we can have more permanent pieces on. So we'll probably have to refresh it a little bit each year. We figure that's a nice size for that door. For the berries, feel free to add on a lot of really fun stuff. You could be very creative. The only thing we don't do is add things like grapes and bananas, because I'll bet you that Mr. DuPont did not use grapes and bananas I bet he ate them if he had anything else, right? So as you can kind of get the idea, we like to do like more of a natural type of place. One place we have a tendency to do a little bit more contemporary, like Christmas balls, would be the soda house and the library, maybe even a little bit at the visitor center, because that's something that's a little bright and showy. The visitor center wreath is it is in a shape. Let me set this down. What happened to my big wooden? There we go. Okay, this is the size that goes on our bus waiting room, okay? And we have these wooden frames. Janet's helped me do a lot of these frames, and Carolyn. And they're pretty heavy. The visitor center one is probably about 4.5 feet wide, and it's in double layers, so it's really almost it's a half a day or to try to get it finished. And we do, they get very, very heavy. So that's why we will sometimes put a lot of material on there. So by the time we do attach it, we put a little extra on there. If the wind takes a little bit down and we miss a few pieces, we're still okay. Unless we get like a hurricane, like Hurricane Irma, we should be okay. So this is what will be on some, similar to the size or a little bit larger on some of the buildings. And the greens are actually stapled on to this. So that does take a little bit of time, but they're really beautiful when they're all finished. Okay, so on our green wreath here, we're going to add on a few of the picks that we really, really like. Okay. Okay. Also, in some of these picks might be a little bit big for some people, but you can also take them apart. We have little wire cutters, and you'll also be able to take those apart. This is the tricky part I really wanted to discuss. Oh, that's okay. I just need my glue. This is the tricky part. We had some issues last year with glue. Okay. 2 things about gluing. Make sure that the item is light enough to be glued on. If it's a really heavy item, like cones, that sort of thing, they need to be wired. So what I usually do with something like this, I'm going to wire it on, and then I'm going to kind of glue it in once it's there. Okay? So what we're going to do first, we're going to wire these in. And you wire it into like a nice heavy spot here. Wire it on tight. Okay? I'm going to poke it in. And you can be very creative on how you really want to design these. Hard part is trying to find the wire. Okay. And it's going to be wired onto the frame. Do not wire it onto a little piece of branch, because what will happen, the branch has a tendency to get a little dry. And when they do get dry, they have a tendency to either fall apart and then the glue comes apart sometimes. Or if it's on the middle of a door that gets very, very warm, the glue has a tendency to run. Does that ever happen to people that items come off sometimes on their door? I'm seeing some yeses. Okay. So now this has been wired in. Okay. It's going to be a lot more secure, and I just kind of glued just the very tip of it in there onto something, just to make sure. Okay. For anything that's a little bit lighter, okay, so there's your one, and the other one, of course, will go on this side as well. So I have a tendency to balance some things out. Another thing that has to go on there too, and this is just going to be my sample one, is going to be fruit. The fruit is really light, so the glue does really well. You really can't wire this on. So with a lot of the wreaths, I like to try to keep it very consistent. Fall fruit should be on one thing, spring fruit is on another. Like citrus really doesn't go with pears. I want either citrus, I'm getting some shakes of the head. Yeah, you guys understand, okay. Like I said, we don't do grapes, we don't do bananas, because they're really, they were kind of rare those days. But we do pears, and we do apples, and we do pomegranates, and that sort of thing. So when we glue something like this on, make sure it has, someone last year did a lot of glue, which was really great. Watch your fingers when you're gluing. Each station will have a little bit of ice cold water there in case someone does get a little bit of a burn. And just hold it still there for just a few minutes. And it does take a few minutes for it to hold. But when you're going to be doing this, these are going to be sitting pretty flat, but just make sure that they're held down there pretty well. Okay. Everyone's so quiet.
Would you put that on even though you have the natural berries on there?
Yes, those holly berries are really pretty, but I'll tell you, they're not going to last.
Oh, okay.
They really don't last. That's why I like to try to add, and they, of course, can be rearranged a little bit when they're on there. Holly berries are really pretty, but they don't last very long. Sometimes, and if you're going to have those at your house, you have to be really kind of careful, because You know, children will pick them up. Dogs have a tendency to eat those. Yeah, right. But they're so pretty. You know, they are really, really nice to use. Okay.
You can keep the bows at the top, or I noticed last year they were like.
Yes, that's one thing that I'd like to do is I always try, and I'll tell you for two reasons. I think they have a tendency to hang a little bit better from the top. When they're at the bottom, they have a tendency to get pulled and they get dirty. You can really kind of cut this one back. And when this is glued on, make sure it's glued on into the center here at the bottom and a little bit here on the stem. To make sure, I'd rather have too much glue on it and not have enough. Sometimes people have a tendency to put just a tiny little bit of glue and it doesn't hold because again, the wreath is really kind of outside in a lot of really bad weather. I really kind of hold it in there. I like the lotus pods with the fruit. I think that just looks really great. Okay. And we're definitely going to add some of this, some of these. I like dried flowers with fruit too. But you could be very creative. You could put your apples with pears. You could get a little crazy. You know. Just do different things. Dried flowers are the same way. Just be careful once you put them on are nice and fresh looking. They're not broken. But sometimes the little pieces, we kind of save the little pieces because we'll put them in tiny little areas. Paula works with the handicraft group and they use every single little piece, don't they? Nothing ever goes to waste. Okay. So we'll have a wide variety of dried flowers. We have straw flowers and we also have globe amaranth. So feel free to use a nice variety as long as all of the colors are consistent. Not too many different colors on one. Like I don't like to have pink and purple and orange and blue, and I never use blue. Nothing is blue. We like everything very traditional here. There won't be anything in blue. It's too contemporary. It's a little, yeah, they really didn't use a lot of blue at the time. It's very, and our theme this year, you know, every year they come up with a different theme. Last year it was a children's Christmas, and this year it's traditional. So we don't want to go too over the edge. We want to get something that's a little bit more traditional here. Okay, I usually would add a little bit more fruit to this, but I know we're short on time. Okay, the thing that's bothering me is this. And of course we can add different types of cones. Some of our cones will be wired, some are not wired. They can be glued on, but I really like them wired on because what happens, the wind catches them and pulls them, and before you know it, you're looking at the wreath and it has 3 cones on one side and 1 cone on the other side, so it looks a little funny. It goes right underneath of the lip. They're pulled tight and twisted. I'm going to put them on this side. And you'll add it on just like you do your ribbon. You're just going to add it on to both sides and just wrap it around and tuck it in. Okay. So it's kind of a mix mash right now, but I wanted to show you all the different items that were going to be on it. Okay. So we'd probably put another lotus pod here. We'd put other cones in different spots. Now the cotton is going to be a little bit different to add on because it's going to be taken apart. I only have a few of these, so they're only going to be put on maybe just a few wreaths. Cotton is so much fun to use, isn't it? So the ones that the wreaths that we will do this on will have predominantly dried flowers and cotton, something that's going to look very natural. I wouldn't put something like this with Christmas balls. Ever. I've had a few that have tried this, why we're having a class today, ladies. Okay. But anyway, and they sometimes just get rearranged, sometimes. But that's okay. So the cotton sometimes, it's kind of neat when it's kind of tucked in here. We'll tuck a couple in, see what they look like. These are really a lot of fun to use because I put all of my main items on first, my large items. Just like when you're making a flower arrangement. Your large items will go on first, then your middle size items, and then your little tiny filler will be at the very end. And all of a sudden you'll poke a little bit of white in there. It looks really kind of neat. I kind of like that. Okay, so we're going to add a couple of those. Let's add a couple of those. Okay. And if you have anything that's very unusual that you like to use, say for instance, if you have like your own pruners, anything like that, please feel free to bring those if they feel more comfortable. We will have plenty, but if you would like to bring your own, you're welcome to do that. Just make sure you write your name on them. Oh, where's my glue? Did I drop all my glue?
It's in there.
I know, but I have another glue stick. Okay. They're in my basket. Okay, so you have a little bit of cotton also popped in there. Okay, for a little bit of color. This is what they call German status. There are different types of statuses that you can buy. This is a German status. And what I always use, again, your filler goes in last. Your main items go in first, your filler goes in last. So you look to see like where the holes are. And think, well, you know, this looks a little empty here, you know, but this is going to be glued in. I'm just setting it in there for right now, but it will be glued in. Okay. You want that for just that little bit of brightness that you want in the back. You kind of tuck it in there pretty tight because wherever you put in something real light colored, it's going to show up. So if you put it way underneath there, it's going to show up. So you start tucking that in different places to use as a nice little filler. Okay, let me set this down and put a few more in. We used to use fresh fruit here at Hagley. But if anyone here works in the garden, and some of you do, you know that I have a rodent and deer problem. So you can imagine what happens if you try to put fresh fruit near that house. It's not going to stay there very long. So the squirrels get part and the deer get part and that sort of thing. So they've decided not to go with fresh fruit any longer. No, I don't know if I like it there. There we go. So as you can see, it's starting to kind of come together with it, but this is about, for my large items, as much as I would really want to put on. I really want to put on any more. This is about as much as it really should be put on. But again, a little bit, maybe just a little bit more status on here. There we go.
Now, you save that to use somewhere?
So they're going to be told that all the bows will be at the top. Hanging is very important. Our service team usually has wire and everything with them. A standard piece of wire like this, we're going to run it right through, make sure it's on the frame really well, make sure it's on this frame. Okay, they can always make it smaller. Okay, I don't know if everyone can see this. And you want to twist this, and twist, 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 leaving just enough that it's able to hang. You're going to leave about this much room hanging this at the bottom. I'm going to kind of pass this around here so you can kind of see this a little bit better. And we can always cut this off at the end, but as long as this is twisted on here really, probably at least about 5 or 6 times to keep it nice and tight. And this should be strong enough. Now here's the tester, okay? And it should shake like this, because it's going to get pushed around a lot, and hopefully nothing comes off, okay? But one thing I want you to test for at the very end, see the little strings of glue? You want to make sure they're all off. I had one person last year, I had him just check for glue. Because when it has a tendency to get wet, all you see are little glue pieces. Okay. And gotta have the wired ribbon, because you can rearrange and rearrange and rearrange. There you go, yeah, for me handling it. Yeah, that's right. So we will have, towards the end of the day, 1 or 2 people just checking all the wreaths just to make sure things are looking more consistent. So we have people just assigned, they're going to be assigned just for that. So if you have a strength in one particular area, let me know. I know Rada, she likes to do a lot of really cool, neat special things. She has really great talent for doing like little detailed work. So she's my detail person. Everyone complimented your work last year. So that's going to be approximate size. We're going to have about 7 that are this size. We will have the larger wreaths. They'll be going on the gates. They go at the front entrance. So you're going to be really, really busy next week. And we're also going to be doing all the roping, hanging all the roping, and decorating a large tree inside the barn, putting all the bows on that. So if anyone's brave enough to do that. And swags are great. They can be very forgiving. The swags can be. And they are going to be going on a lot of the lamp posts near the first office and along the river. And what I do, again, I try to use a nice variety of greens. We have some nice spruce here, pine, boxwood, and I like to use a variety. So I start with my longest, heaviest piece at the bottom, because this piece, if you put the pine at the bottom, see the pine just gets lost. You know, this is going to hold up really well. So we would put layers of pine. We're going to try to keep it about the same length here at the top. We're going to make it wide, not just make it like a droop. It's going to be made nice and wide. We want them nice and full. And then we start layering with smaller pieces at the top. So it's going to be your bottom layer here at the bottom. Okay, I think I want that to be and you can make these really nice and thick. This is a small one. This is one of the small ones that'll probably go on the lamp post that'll be at the first office. So we'll have several of those. We also put them at the Cooper shop. We put them across the river. And so when we make these, we have tags already made up, and you'll pull a tag when you get in there and say, okay, wow, this is for a swag. And it might say 1 of 2. So if you're going to make one, I want you to make the second one, because I want them to be alike. So the swag tag, and I have my little tags here somewhere. Anyway, the tag might say, oh, here it is. Okay. This is going to be a little wreath that we're going to make for the buses. So 4 people will be making a fresh wreath. Okay, we can have 2 people making 2 of them, but we'll need 4 for the buses. And this is saying 1 of 4, so we'll need a total of 4. So either one person will make all 4, because I want them exactly alike, or 2 people are going to work side by side. And some of the really large wreaths, sometimes 2 people can work side by side on those as well. So the swags will say the same thing. They might say 1 of 2. The first office, 1 of 2. So that person will be making 2 of them. Okay, so this is about the right size for the first office. Let's just make it a little bit bigger. Maybe a little thicker. Let's do a little big piece at the bottom. Okay, let's do that. There we go. Nice length there at the bottom. Okay. And with your wire, this is the tricky part. A lot of times people don't make it tight enough. We want it really nice and tight. I'm going to put several wires around this. This is just to initially hold it together for me. I have small fingers. The two that will go up in front of the house, we have in front of the residence, we have 2 lamp posts, and they will be very long and they're going to be wide. And they get swung around in the wind. They really, really move around a lot. So they have to be real, everything really needs to be wired on. An extra long piece of wire, I'd rather use a long piece of wire because eventually with these swags, you're going to do just like the wreath, you're going to leave a little loop at the back and wire that on there pretty tight. Going to really, really twist it like that, and it's going to hang like this. Okay, so of course we can add a ribbon onto this. Let's use one of these. These are not overly decorated. So the big thing is more the ribbon and the greens, you know, so I like to go a little bit longer on that. Swags are so much easier to make, aren't they? You just kind of throw them together. They look really great. You can put them together and put about 5 or 6 together, put them on a fireplace. Swags are really great to use. And what's really nice about those, sometimes when you put them together, if you want to trim them at the bottom, you can even keep them in water. Keep the bottoms in water for a little bit before you hang them up. And that way they stay nice and fresh if they can really absorb a lot of water. So again, I put 4 good sized loops on because again, it'll be, it's kind of the main feature of something like this, even though the swag is a little small. But we will have bow makers there, so don't panic. When you get something finished, people go, oh no, she wants me to make a bow. That'll be okay. We'll have lots of bow makers. And we will have some nice Christmas music. Jen has offered to lend us her CD player, so we always have our nice Christmas music. Have to have Christmas music and food. We don't do anything here without food. No, I don't miss a meal. I like my little snacks. Carolyn will tell you, yeah, we always have snacks, don't we?
If you ever require or request, let me know. I'm getting the food for you. So
Yep.
let me know what you want. Within reason. Some sort of a dip last year that was really good.
Oh yeah, who made that dip? That was really delicious. Was it Dolores? Dolores may have made that dip. I have to find out who that was. Yeah, that was very popular. That was really good. I think we had some left over the next day, and I think I ate it for lunch.
And the video, what I'm going to do with the video is I'm going to post it on the Hagley YouTube channel, and I'll make sure I'll let you know when it's available. And see if you want to watch anything else again, you can certainly do that.
Okay. These can all be rearranged. Okay. Now at this point, you can add on pretty much anything that you like. On the swags, I really try not to put anything that's going to be heavy, that's going to get blown around, like fruit or anything like that. Berries are usually really, really good to add because we can always kind of put those back on pretty easily. Sometimes if we get some really high winds, the next morning I will have bits of fruit sitting on my desk. And they will say, well, this came off of this wreath, or this came off this wreath. And that happens sometimes, but you know.
You have to inspect everything every day to make
Yeah, we do. We do a drive around. We sure do. Yes, we sure do. Because sometimes things can get, especially, we have our guests that come in the evening and they have a really, certain expectation, want to see certain things certain ways. So especially around the door frames, decorate our door frames and they get bumped. And so sometimes, we'll have a crew come in and micromanage a couple little things. So sometimes on some of these, we might just have bows on them like this. Or sometimes we'll have a lot, like I said, we'll have a lot of really, really nice berries that'll be attached in here too. Okay.
You always have a bow, is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You make these sorts of things too?
The roping.
Yeah.
The roping we purchase in, and we have two different types of roping this year. We have one that is a Douglas fir and a cedar. It's really pricey. Roping has, they've had some disease problems in North Carolina. So things have been a little pricey to get in. A 75-foot roll is close to $100.
But you don't make them. That would be very good.
I've had to do that at times for weddings. And yeah, it takes a long time. It really does.
And it must spin as you work,
Yes, you have to lay it down and twist it. So, the people that do that, God bless them, I'm glad they do it because I don't have to. I would not want to do this because it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy to be able to just to do probably like a 90-foot. I've done weddings where you had to do fresh greens for about 150 feet. And again, when you add some of the berries in, these are really heavy. Again, I want them wired, really not glued. Wiring does take a few minutes, but and, yes. And the berries are really great because they hold up a long time. And I do not like to use the types of berries you see in the store that have like a styrofoam base to them because they get, they get really bad. So all the ones that we're getting in, they just basically fall apart. It's because they have like a little plastic coating on it. So the ones we're going to be getting are like a solid plastic, and they're going to hold up quite a bit better. So I have several hundred of these that are just coming in. We have some from last year. We have a wide variety of different types. So this is not complete, obviously, but there'll be a wide variety of different berries that'll be on here. Again, we try not to use anything like Christmas balls or anything. It's going to be outside. It's going to be torn up. Cones will be added to something like this. Anything that's going to be nice and natural, that will be added. So I think the swags are kind of like, people say, oh, I'm a swag person, and you can make swags. And again, some of this would look really, really pretty on it as well. You can always add, it gives you that little bit of a white frost look. People ask me why I don't have frosted material. If it has not snowed, it's not supposed to be frosted. It hasn't snowed. I'm very particular about it. And I don't like a combination of things not frosted and things frosted because it doesn't make any sense to me. If it was going to snow, it would have snowed the entire item and not just some of the items. So I'm just going to kind of poke this right in here for you for right now. Add just that little bit of white sometimes in there. So I kind of like the idea of dried flowers in something like this. So you can actually this is light enough that you can actually glue on to like little pieces there at the bottom. That's fine. But obviously would have larger berries, more berries on it, but this is for a little sample today. When you make a bow, sometimes people say, I really, really want it nice and full, and they want quite a number of tails on it. So you would make your bow, your standard bow, you always make it the same number of loops on both sides. My dad was my bow maker. Whenever I needed a bow person, he always made all my bows for me. And they'll have a long ribbon. So what they do sometimes is, if they want if they don't want a big bow but they want more tails on it, and they just add this right to the very bottom. They do this a lot for weddings. That way the bow won't be too big, but you'll have a lot of tails on it. And for the little bouquet that gets thrown, they like to put a lot of tails on it so the girls can fight over it. Sick. sick thing. But you know, that's what a florist does. They do it for excitement, you know? And that's how you got the extra tails on that. Because it is such a long piece, you know, you like to have something like that on there. So it gives you extra little tails there at the bottom. Yep. Sometimes we've even had, and this happens sometimes, and this is okay. I only have a little bit of ribbon left. And I think this is really not a lot to make a really, really nice bow. But if you can get a compatible color with that, this is not compatible. But what they would do is they'll make this with just several loops and they'll put another compatible color of solid gold or a solid, you know, dark red, and they'll fill that in at the top and incorporate it. Just do different, and so sometimes never throw away those little pieces because, you know, we do use them. And of course at the very end, sometimes we, if you have some of these, we do have wilt proof. We spray them at the very end with wilt proof, and that kind of helps retain some of the moisture. Yeah, thank you, ladies. The different types of greens we're going to be using. We're going to use a really nice variety of greens here. And the reason why is because you get more texture inside the wreath or in the swag, and also you get a nice variety of different colors. And they seem to hold up a little bit better too. So I'm going to talk about the different types of greens that we're going to be using. We have things like boxwood. You know, that's always kind of nice to use because it's a nice, really nice old-fashioned green. It's a really great filler. Some we use for color, some we use for filler. So the boxwood is really nice. It holds up a long time, and it's a really nice filler. We have another one that looks very similar to it. And you probably have some of these at your home too. These are Japanese holly. They look very similar, and these hold up really well. So even if we have a tendency to get some warm weather, this one's a really good one to kind of stick with. Another one we have here, we have different types of spruces. And spruces are always kind of nice. Not always someone's favorite because they're a little picky. So only the ones that can really kind of handle getting poked out quite a little bit will have the spruces. And the spruces are really nice because they hold up a long time and offer you a nice variety of different textures. Everyone's favorite is usually pine. It has that really nice, delicious scent to it. But they have a tendency to be a little thin. So this is not something we would put at the bottom when we're constructing because it has a tendency to be thin and might hide. So we put it on the top of a lot of the greens, which we'll go into. Some of the things we like to use sometimes that holds up very well too is euonymus. It looks like something that would really drop its leaves, but they really retain their leaves throughout the winter time. And it offers sometimes a very interesting texture. Some other things, now this is one of my favorites to use, and this is yew, Y-E-W. And sometimes, you know, people, if you've lived into an old home and there's the yew plants get really huge, and if you have any at your house and you want to bring it in, that's fine. Love that. This holds up really great in the heat. You know, if it happens to get a couple warm days, the front of the visitor center and the front of the store, those walls have a tendency to get really toasty. So we've had to replace that a few times, which can be a little trying. We've had to actually take the large wooden frames down and take it apart and have to redo. But when it has yew on it, it lasts a little bit longer. So this is really one of my favorites. Another tricky one a lot of people really love to use is holly. And holly looks very nice, but the only problem is sometimes it has a tendency to drop its leaves pretty easily. But, and holly is another one that's not really as much of a filler, but it's more of an accent. So everyone does know magnolia. Magnolia is another really nice favorite. And they use these at a lot down in Williamsburg. They use a lot of magnolia on the really nice frames. They do have a tendency, though, to escape, a lot of water escapes, and they have a tendency to curl. So I'm very particular about where we place something like this. I usually place it someplace where if it has to be replaced, it can be replaced pretty easily. So we're going to be making wreaths. That's something, well, most of the wreaths will be made up already for you, so you will be decorating them. But with some of them, we might want to add a few greens on too, and that's always a lot of fun. But this is something that usually we kind of ask about that. Another thing that people think, I can't believe you used this, but I've actually used English ivy on some wreaths, and it holds up all winter long, and it gives you a nice, interesting little texture. Sometimes that could be a little bit of a challenge. We're going to be decorating on those, so we will be adding things like you have cones, magnolia seed heads, which are really kind of, and again, this is a really heavy texture. You would put this on one of the larger wreaths, really large cones on larger wreaths. These also can go on the small ones too, but we have these smaller sizes. So we kind of do those for ratio for sizes. There are a couple things you don't want to put on a wreath, even though they're kind of pretty. Wild rose. That's not really, the beads are beautiful. I mean, the little seed heads, they're really lovely. I really like them, but the only problem is that, you know, they are rather invasive. And when we are finished with these wreaths, we take the greens off the metal frame and we throw them up into the dump area, or we compost them, and we don't want more. We already have plenty and we don't want any more. So that's just our little sample of that. So when you start a wreath, you're going to start by wrapping about 6 inches of your wire onto your wreath, like this, so it's nice and sturdy. That's going to be your start. And what I always do is I always kind of pick through a little bit. This is actually going to be in layers. So the first layer, and I'm just going to do a mix of greens here. Some people like prefer all one type of green, but I like to do a little bit of a mix. And your really thick material will go at the bottom. And your really nice material that you like at the top, which could be like your holly, that would go at the top. Because when you actually set it on here, you're going to want your really pretty pieces at the top. So even though you might be cutting some of these pieces off, you might have some odds and ends that look kind of what we call ugly cuts, but they're really great to put at the bottom because they'll fill the bottom in for you, and you can put your pretty pieces on the top. So we start with our very first piece. This is where people always have a lot of questions. Because they always say, okay, how am I going to wire this on? The wire is not cut. Everyone always wants to cut the wire all the time. You do not cut the wire. It stays as one whole piece. And it's wrapped several times tightly to stay on there. Okay, so that'll be your start, just like that. And your second piece, I dropped it. Okay, so dropped it.
Wasn't tight enough.
That's right. I missed it on there. Okay. So that'll be tight, nice and tight on there. So then your second set will be, again, you'll be taking pieces apart. You don't want really large pieces. You want small, handleable, something that can be handled pretty easily, pretty small. Okay. So these are actually going to be wrapped on here rather tight. And then the second set will slightly overlap on top. So you're going to cover your mechanics. You're not going to set it on top. A lot of people like to keep piling it on top. I don't understand that. But they like to pile it on top. Just slightly cover your mechanics. And you will continue around the entire way, just like this. And I always have a tendency to make mine pretty thick. Sometimes people make them a little on the thin side, and then it's very difficult to add afterwards. You can do that because once you're all finished, you can kind of poke it in a little bit. But the only problem is that sometimes then you're kind of covering up all your favorite things. So as you cut, they'll be slightly overlapped.
Just go like 3 or 4 times?
3 or 4 times, as long as you make sure you keep it nice and tight. Yep. Sometimes people say, well, I don't know if I want to mix the greens, but when the mix of greens are all finished, they look really lovely. They look nice and fresh, and they hold up a little bit longer. That way, in case you have a tendency to maybe lose some of the pine or some of the holly, you still have a little bit of a backup. So making one of these really only takes just a few minutes.
Now, the ones we get won't be a mix of these.
It'll be one type, it'll be a mix of Douglas fir and cedar. And I have a new source for those this year too, and they're going to be beautiful. There is a company up in Philadelphia, and they get everything all freshly cut out of central Pennsylvania. And the ones last year, if any of you were here, how many were here last year? Okay, some of them just like a flat green. These are going to be really, really nice, thick, large wreaths, and they're going to have cones on them. They're going to be really nice. I'm very excited when I heard about this source. Very excited about it. Don't be afraid to be a little aggressive with these.
How many wreaths will there be in total?
We usually make, I think we have about 32 wreaths, about between 30 and 32. We've added some extra items on this year. We're going to be doing extra roping, and we're also going to be doing some extra Christmas trees. We're going to have a large Christmas tree inside the barn this year. And Paula has been very, very kind to make about 180 bows. So, I know. So, being very, very generous. Thank you. I said, are you sure you want to take this on? She said, I can take it on. So if anyone else would like to help her and you can make real little bows, if you're a bow person, Carolyn, she's my bow girl. Carolyn was used a lot for bows last year. She makes excellent bows. Now to keep your greens nice and fresh, sometimes when we pick these, I put them into a plastic bag and I keep them in a nice cool place. You can also, when you cut them, put into like large buckets of water, put a little floral preserve in there, and they really hold up for much longer of a time. Now there is an area of business here, Marini's, I know, and they have a secret ingredient that they use to spray their wreaths with. I don't know whether anyone knows about that, but their wreaths last forever. I've yet to find out what that secret ingredient is because they won't share it. No, we've had wilt proof. It's a combination of different items. I have a friend of mine that works there, but they won't share it. But they do have some really beautiful wreaths, and they last a long time. So the reason I'm making this in front of you is to show you that, guess what? You can make it pretty quickly. You can make it very easily. And as you start to get towards the bottom here, this is when people get a little confused. So you now have a little mix of greens. It looks nice, and it doesn't have that trimmed off tiny tight. You have what it really is supposed to look like. It's supposed to be a nice bundle variety of greens. So as you get towards the bottom, and we'll be using a nice variety for the last ones, you're going to start finishing this off. So it'll start getting a little tight at the bottom. And where you leave off at the very bottom is where you're going to be placing your bow. So that'll kind of cover up any type of mechanics that you might have. Here we go. Okay, so this is where we stop adding the greens. So what we want to do at this point, we will stretch out some wire. And what you want to do at the end of your wire right here, you want to weave this through several times to finish this off. Okay, so it's going to be woven through several times. So at this point you can do a little trimming if you like to do that. I like mine a little on the wild side, so some people like them trimmed very, very, very tight. I don't really like to do that. So up here at the top, then we're going to start adding our ribbon, our bow. Now we're going to talk about different types of ribbon. So our ribbon here, we have several types that are available on the market. And when you're shopping for them, it can be a little overwhelming. Sometimes your really least expensive, pretty ribbon may not be your best choice. So we have like a little satin ribbon. This is not for outdoors. It's mainly an indoor ribbon. It's not wired and has a tendency to it flattens out. Sometimes people will use it. It's less expensive. They might use it as a cemetery type of thing. You know, that's okay because it'll hold up for a short time. You have your more decorative ribbon that is wired, okay? And this is really nice because you can take it apart and reuse it several times and it holds up You can rearrange it. It can be very forgiving. You can twist it all around. Then you have two types of velvets. You have one type of velvet, and people think, oh, it's nice velvet ribbon. And it is considered an outdoor ribbon, and it's finished off on the back. But the only problem is that it's not wired. And sometimes without a wired ribbon outside, again, you get a few days of maybe some cold weather, some rain really beating on the door. Especially here, all of these are not indoor. They're all going to be really susceptible to a lot of wind and cold. And this is what happens. It has tendency to get a little flat, but they're really nice for indoor. Now the last one, I didn't want it to get dirty, so I kept it wrapped up. And you might pay a little bit of extra for this, but this is a nice velvet and it's wired. And it's very good quality. And it's really good to go with a really good high quality ribbon because it's going to be easier for you to manage and the color is going to stay very nice. It's not going to fade. And you could probably reuse it for a couple of years. Okay, so what I'm going to do is start my ribbon. I'm really weird. I like to put my bow on before I put my picks on because I know I take up a lot of room with a bow. Okay, now also with bows too, everyone does this a little bit differently. I like to kind of trim off my end here a little bit. Some people do it with little notches. They do it with all kinds of different things, but okay. I don't profess to be the best ribbon person in the whole world, so Paula is going to be helping us with a lot of ribbons, and Carolyn. So if you're in there and you want a really, really great bow, these are going to be the ladies to talk to. So in a wreath at about this size, you're going to proportion it so that the tail is not going to go too far down. It's only going to go to about halfway. That's where you want your tail to end, about halfway down. Okay. It's going to be approximately a foot along 24-inch. Okay, so that's about halfway. Now, we gather it in the center here. And when you make a bow, the top of this bow always faces towards you. Okay. So we make our top little loop in the front. That's going to be your very top. And again, this always faces towards you. And you twist it. That's what kind of gives it that little bit of oomph. It's because it's twisted. I make my bows different than a lot of other people, you know. And I always make it a standard. The standard is about a 3 to 4 looped bow. And each layer will be just a little wider than the one before. It gathers between your fingers. And I know you're saying, I'll have to practice this a lot. And you can. You're not going to do it the first time, which is okay. It's a fun thing to practice, too. Each bow takes between 3 to 4 yards, depending on the size of the bow that you're making. Some of our really large ones from last year, they might take up to several yards, the really, really, really large ones. You don't want them too large that they get floppy. You want them to stay nice and tight. And you're going to measure out to about a foot again. Let's see if I find my wire. Okay, you get your piece of wire and you're going to wrap it right inside the center. A little hard to show there. Just like that. And you're going to pull it very tight and twist. The reason why I hook it onto here, because sometimes if you pre-cut your ribbon, you're going to find sometimes it's too short. You're going to find out it's too long, and it gets rather wasteful. And that's one thing I try not to do here is waste too much. For anyone here that knows it, volunteers with me all the time, knows I don't like to waste very many things. Okay. So the advantage of having it wired is that you can rearrange it. So this is going to be your standard size for a small wreath like this. This is going to be your standard. Here at Hagley, we have a tendency not to have everything a little over the top. They're really not into over the top type of things. Everything is a little more on the conservative side, as some of you probably already know from being here. And I'm going to actually get a longer piece of wire and attach it on. The reason why I have 2 wires is I finish it off with 1 wire, and then I hook it on with a different wire. That way, in case you need to cut it, you're not taking apart the entire bow. So you're probably thinking I was crazy. Why was I doing that? Okay. And you put this right here. You put your bow at your empty spot. Twist it up very tight in the back. And there's your standard bow for that size. Is that rational? For pretty much about that size. You don't want anything too large. You don't want it to get lost on there. So that's usually a 3 to 4 loop type of bow.